Alien Elite Human Test. The Rythari Dominion had conquered 1,000 systems with fire and steel, their military doctrine sharpened across centuries of relentless conquest. Their warships were impenetrable fortresses, their soldiers, towering and precise, obeyed strategy like law. But today, they stood confused in the wet, green mess of a human jungle planet. Colonel Varntal adjusted the neural visor around his 4 eyes, irritation coiling in his voice. "Lieutenant Briggs, where are your soldiers?" Lieutenant Cole Briggs didn't answer immediately. He stood with arms crossed beneath the shade of a massive fern, chewing a twig like it was a cigar. His camo uniform was dusty with dried mud, his face unreadable. "They're here, Colonel." Varntal's nostrils flared. "I see no units in the field. You said this was a camouflage demonstration. Are your soldiers late?" Briggs chuckled. "You're looking at them right now." The colonel blinked all 4 eyes and scanned the dense jungle ahead. Trees stood like silent sentinels. Vines drooped lazily in the humid air. A shallow bog gurgled under the weight of nothing. And yet, nothing moved. No heat signatures. No footsteps. Not even the scent of human sweat. Behind Varntal, several Rythari soldiers cycled through their scanner presets. Thermal, acoustic, bioelectric, all clear. The environment appeared devoid of life, except for the background insects and amphibians. "This test is meaningless," snapped Varntal. "You expect me to believe humans can vanish? You lack active cloaking, and this planet interferes with visual dampeners." Briggs's smile widened just a bit. "We don't need cloaking. We've got mud and bushes." A low murmur passed between the Rythari. The phrase was so primitive, so absurd. "Mud and bushes? This isn't some barbaric ritual," Varntal growled. "We're here to witness your tactical capability." "And you are," Briggs said calmly. "Tell you what, if any of your team spots one of my 6 soldiers within the next 30 minutes, I'll buy your whole unit drinks on Earth." The alien commander narrowed his gaze. Challenge accepted. With a snap of his clawed fingers, Rythari soldiers fanned out into the foliage. Their movements were clean and practiced, heads turning in rhythm, pulse rifles raised. A hovering drone launched into the canopy, its sensor array blinking in precise intervals. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. The forest remained untouched. The only movement came from wind passing through leaves and the occasional ripple on the bog surface. Even the drone's enhanced optics found only plants, water, and moss. "Commander," one of the Rythari soldiers called over the comms. "Area clear. Negative contact." Briggs looked at his watch and muttered, 20 minutes to go." Varntal hissed, "Enough games." Suddenly, something fluttered down from above. Just a leaf. The colonel batted it aside, annoyed. Then another. Then a whisper. "Nice boots." Varntal froze. He turned in a full circle, raising his rifle. "Who said that?" he barked. No response. No sign. Only that damn bog gurgling again. The drone dipped lower, scanning every inch of the clearing. Still nothing. Until, blip, for a fraction of a second, a shape registered near the base of a tree. But when the camera zoomed in, there was only bark and moss. "Colonel," barked a Rythari tech. "Drone 3 just lost signal." "What?" "Downed. Pulled underwater." Briggs folded his arms tighter. 15 minutes left. One Rythari soldier near the bog felt something brush his shoulder. He whipped around. Nothing. But a moment later, a small vine with a green ribbon was tied around his wrist. He screamed and tumbled backward, firing a shot into the air. "Cease fire," Varntal roared. "I didn't see anyone," the soldier stammered. "I swear someone touched me." The Rythari unit regrouped, unnerved. Sweat beaded under their armor despite the climate controls. The jungle was playing tricks on them, or something in it was. Briggs raised his voice slightly. 3 more taps, and you're done. You're lucky they're using paintballs." Suddenly, a bright green splatter appeared across the chest plate of the second-in-command. He stared down at it, stunned. 2 more, Briggs called out. The jungle was no longer just terrain. It was enemy territory. Every rustle became a warning, every ripple a ghost, and not a single human had been seen. Finally, as the countdown ended, Briggs clapped once. That's time. From the trees, from the bog, from beneath logs and vines, 6 soldiers emerged. Covered in mud, moss, and bark, they looked like creatures of the earth itself. Each one was smeared head to toe in camouflage, so detailed it defied technology. One of them, a stocky woman named Ramirez, grinned as she pulled a leaf from her helmet. "Nice boots," she said. Varntal stared, jaw clenched, speechless. Briggs walked past him and patted his shoulder. "We don't disappear, Colonel. We blend. Big difference." And then he walked off, the jungle swallowing his footsteps once more. Mud, blood, and leaves. Ramirez crouched beside the shallow stream, scooping up a thick handful of mud and smearing it across her forearms. The paste was cold and gritty, clinging to her skin like a second layer. She didn't flinch. This wasn't for comfort. It was for survival. "All right, ghosts," Lieutenant Briggs said, pacing in front of the 6 camo-clad soldiers. "This is no longer just a demo. The Rythari don't think we're dangerous. They think we're cute, like we're playing soldier in the backyard. I want them afraid to breathe." Private Torres, the youngest of the group, raised an eyebrow as he rubbed leaves into the folds of his ghillie suit. "Sir, is this really necessary? I mean, we've got drones. Thermal gear." Briggs shot him a look sharp enough to cut steel. "You think your gear makes you invisible? Kid, tech fails. Batteries die. Satellites go dark. But this," he said, gesturing to the mud, "this never runs out. Nature is the oldest cloak we have, and we were born knowing how to use it." The squad nodded as they continued prepping. Each soldier had their own method, weaving vines into netting, stuffing moss into pouches, layering soil onto their faces until they became unrecognizable. They worked silently, their movements efficient and practiced. This wasn't the first time they'd melted into a jungle. Sergeant Dana Moose, Harper sat waist-deep in the water, eyes closed, slowing her breathing to a crawl. She had once held her position in a mangrove swamp for 36 hours without moving an inch. When the enemy patrol passed within 10 feet, they hadn't even noticed the small air tube hidden among the reeds. "This ain't just a test," she murmured. "It's a hunt." Briggs watched from the shadows, satisfied. They were ready. The Rythari command team, now 30 minutes into the exercise, was unraveling. They had deployed 4 drones, thermal scanners, electromagnetic pings, and still nothing. No movement, no heat, no clues. Their soldiers fanned out into the jungle, wearing now tense. Their confidence had drained like water from a cracked bowl. "What kind of camouflage fools heat sensors?" barked one of the Rythari lieutenants, frustration bleeding through his comm. A nearby human advisor answered from the observation platform. "They don't just cover themselves. They cool themselves. Slow breathing. Mud acts as insulation. What plants reflect light, not absorb it. Human bodies disappear when they match the jungle's rhythm." "Primitive," the Rythari officer muttered. "Effective," the human countered. In the underbrush, Ramirez slid on her belly, her body coated in dark clay and fern fragments. Every inch of her gear was silent, taped, padded, sealed. Even her breathing was practiced through shallow mouth movements, almost imperceptible. Ahead of her, 2 Rythari scouts scanned the terrain. They were tall and broad, their armor gleaming despite the jungle's grime. One of them turned slightly, giving Ramirez the angle she needed. She reached forward and plucked a single vine. A moment later, the scout felt something tap his shoulder. He spun, but there was nothing, just plants. He cursed, eyes darting around. High above, another human, Corporal Leong, hung upside down from a thick tree limb, netted in vines and bark. Her rifle was slung silently on her back. She had been in position for 20 minutes, unmoving, heart rate down to 45 BPM. As the alien below stepped forward, Leong dropped a small pebble behind him. When he turned again, she ghosted silently down and slipped into the canopy on the opposite side. Meanwhile, Torres had buried himself in a shallow pit covered with leaves and dirt, leaving only a slit to observe the path. 2 Rythari passed within a meter of him, their sensors clicking uselessly. He grinned, letting out a soft whisper. "Boo!" Both Rythari whirled around in panic. One tripped over a root. The other fired his rifle blindly into the undergrowth, hitting nothing. Contact. I heard a voice. There's no one there. From the trees, Briggs observed silently through binoculars. He marked another mental note. 5 encounters. 0 sightings. They're cracking. Back at the Rythari base camp, the colonel's patience had thinned to vapor. This is not possible, he growled. Your soldiers are not using technology. Not even active camo. Nope, said the human observer. Just biology, instincts, and centuries of not dying in jungles. They're toying with us. The human officer chuckled. You said it, not me. As the sun began to dip, Briggs gave the call for extraction. One by one, the human soldiers emerged from the terrain like it was birthing them. Ramirez climbed out of the bog, covered in algae. Torres crawled from the pit. Liang descended silently, like a whisper from the treetops. They stood in formation, dirty, silent, triumphant. Varntal walked up to Briggs, his face a storm of disbelief. Where are they hiding? He demanded. Briggs simply pointed to the jungle. Everywhere. The Rythari looked around in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand. The humans hadn't used tech. They hadn't cheated. They had simply become the jungle. And for the first time, the mighty Dominion realized they had been watched the entire time. Predator instincts. The jungle was silent, but not still. Corporal Liang moved without sound across a thick branch 10 feet above the ground. Below her, the Rythari patrol inched forward with weapons drawn, sensors sweeping in lazy arcs. Their armor still shimmered from the faint pulse of internal scanners, but the jungle mocked their efforts. They were being hunted, and they knew it. This is no longer a test, Sergeant Harper whispered through the team comms. This is a lesson. Ramirez, crouched beneath a thick curtain of vines, responded with a low chuckle. They're twitchier than rookies on night patrol. Briggs listened from his position in a shallow ditch camouflaged with reeds. The squad had switched to observation mode after overwhelming the Rythari's confidence earlier. Now they were shifting the game from concealment to control. We don't just vanish, Briggs said quietly. We bend the battlefield. 2 Rythari scouts advanced carefully, their heavy boots squelching in the mud. The taller one froze as something brushed his back. He turned sharply. Nothing, except a low-hanging branch was now broken. A single leaf drifted to the ground. His partner scanned the trees. I hate this place, the tall one muttered. Shut up and focus. They took another step, and a burst of compressed air hissed near their feet. They jumped back, rifles raised. On the ground lay a painted rock, shaped like a human skull. What is this? Psychological warfare, the tall one growled. Looks like it's working, Ramirez whispered from the shadows, smirking. Back at the mobile observation center, the Rythari colonel's frustration had boiled into fury. He watched the live sensor feeds display anomaly after anomaly. Brief heat spikes that vanished, movement detected and then gone, signals scrambled in one zone only to reappear miles away. They're manipulating the terrain itself, his science officer said. I believe they're deliberately triggering false positives. With what? Varntal snarled. Sticks and rocks? The human liaison, a calm woman named Captain Alana Drew, leaned forward. More like decoys. They use scent markers, pressure triggers, even water displacement. You're tracking shadows while they move through the blind spots. These tricks are outdated. Crude. They're ancient, Drew corrected, which means they've worked for thousands of years. Against humans, animals, and now aliens. The colonel said nothing. His silence was beginning to sound like surrender. Back in the jungle, Torres crawled beneath a massive root system, his face painted in streaks of black ash and green moss. A Rythari drone hovered just meters above him, scanning the area with a wide-spectrum lens. He didn't move, didn't breathe too deeply. The mud over his back kept his heat signature flat, his motionless body resembling just another lump of earth. As the drone pivoted away, he slowly reached for a small bundle on his belt. He pressed a button. A tiny speaker lodged elsewhere in the trees released a human voice whispering, "You're not alone." The nearest Rythari soldier panicked, turning to fire into the foliage. Another soldier ducked instinctively, assuming it was an ambush. Within 10 seconds, the patrol was scattered, confused, and shouting over each other's comms. Pull back. They're behind us. No, they're under us. Briggs watched it unfold from his perch in a high tree. They weren't just defeating the Rythari sensors. They were fracturing their discipline. This, he thought, was the power of unseen pressure. Later that evening, the team regrouped at the extraction point. All 6 soldiers emerged, calm and casual, as if returning from a stroll. Vines still clung to their helmets. Mud dripped from their packs. Their skin, painted in earthy streaks, matched the jungle even as they walked. Harper was the last to arrive, climbing silently from beneath the roots of an upturned tree. Had a nap. Woke up next to a Rythari foot patrol. They still don't know I was there. Ramirez grinned. We should charge rent. We've lived in their heads all day. Torres slung his rifle over his shoulder. Sir, we turned them into prey, didn't we? Briggs looked over the team. We reminded them what humans are. Not just warriors, not just thinkers, but predators. He paused, wiping a smear of dried clay from his forearm. When you strip away the tech, the toys, the satellites, what's left? Us. And this, he tapped his temple, this ancient primal instinct to survive and dominate. You don't need cloaking when you are the jungle. The Rythari left the site without a word. There was no official debriefing, no dismissal, just silence. In the days to follow, word of the test would spread through Dominion military networks. The official report labeled it a training anomaly. Unofficially, it became something else. A warning that humans didn't hide behind technology. They simply disappeared. And by the time you saw one, it was already too late. The unseen weapon. The transport shuttle hummed softly as it lifted off from the jungle clearing, its engines cutting through the thick canopy of leaves. Inside, Colonel Varntal sat rigid in his seat, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. He hadn't spoken since boarding. Across from him, Captain Alana Drew reviewed a datapad, the screen showing sensor logs from the camouflage test. Thermal dead zones, false signal patterns, and movement anomalies flashed in ordered chaos. They're not supposed to be able to do this, Varntal muttered, more to himself than anyone. You mean humans? Drew asked, glancing up. He said nothing, but his silence said everything. Meanwhile, back in the field, the human squad stood at ease under the makeshift jungle awning of their forward base. Sunlight filtered through the green canopy, casting patterned shadows across their faces. They were covered in grime, scratches, and leftover camouflage, but they stood tall, the jungle no longer something they used, but something they became. Briggs finished a sip from his canteen, his voice steady. Mission accomplished. 6 human ghosts in, 0 sightings, 7 confirmed psychological breakdowns, and 4 drones neutralized. Ramirez gave a tired grin, and a paintball to the face of their second-in-command. I call that art. Torres wiped mud from his cheek. They're going to write horror stories about this, aren't they? Harper stretched, cracking her knuckles. Doubt they'll ever admit it happened. Briggs turned serious. Doesn't matter. They felt it. That's the win. At Dominion Command, several light years away, the footage from the test played in front of a gathered panel of Rythari generals, advisors, and strategists. Despite the high-resolution feeds, they still couldn't locate the humans in most frames. Only after overlays, enhancements, and annotations did figures slowly emerge, shapes that had been there the entire time. The generals whispered among themselves. These are not soldiers. These are shadow beasts. How did they disable drones without energy weapons? They used mud, someone muttered in disbelief. One scientist stood, pale and uneasy. We've designed our forces for battlefield superiority, advanced scans, precision strikes, orbital support. But these humans don't play by the same rules, another finished grimly. The supreme strategist, an aging Rythari with a deep scar across his jaw, leaned forward. Can this be replicated? The scientist hesitated. No, not with our physiology, not with our training systems. Their success is behavioral, evolutionary. It's not a tactic. It's instinct. A cold silence fell across the room. They had come to study the humans. Instead, they had been hunted by them. Back on the jungle planet, dusk was falling. The team was packing gear, rolling up camouflage netting, and checking their kits. Briggs stood a little apart, writing a final report into a field log. He paused mid-sentence, staring out into the trees. The jungle was alive. Chirping insects, whispering leaves, distant echoes. But to him, it was something else. It was home. Liang approached him. "Sir, word is, we're getting reassigned." He nodded slowly. "Urban training simulation. Same test. Different terrain. They think we'll do worse. They're hoping." Liang smirked. "Guess they haven't seen us blend into a war-torn alleyway." He looked back at her, eyes gleaming beneath the dirt. "We don't need vines to vanish. Give us shadows and shattered glass. We'll become the dust." She nodded once and walked back toward the others. In orbit, a confidential Rythari report was sent under heavy encryption. It was brief, only 2 lines. Subject: Human Camouflage Doctrine. Recommendation: avoid jungle engagement. Eliminate from distance or not at all. Weeks later, a new test began on another world. This time, an abandoned urban zone, broken buildings and scorched concrete under an orange sun. The Rythari deployed heavier patrols, upgraded optics, more drones. They were confident this time, until, one by one, their units reported strange sightings, nothing on sensors but movement out of the corner of the eye. A shape in a window, a figure in a mirror, a breath on the back of the neck. Then silence. When they found the first tagged soldier, he was slumped against a crumbling wall, a handprint in ash smeared across his chest plate. A second had a blood-red X on his visor. Paint, but terrifying. There were no bodies, no attackers, just that familiar, crushing dread. Back at a secure command center, an alien analyst spoke quietly into a communicator. "I believe we've made a mistake." "Define," the voice on the other end replied. "We underestimated the human capacity to adapt, blend, and dominate without being seen." The line went silent. Then, reclassify their camouflage doctrine. To what? The analyst hesitated, watching a replay of a Rythari soldier screaming at shadows. Then, in a cold voice, he answered, "Predator-class stealth." Final scene. Briggs, Ramirez, and the team knelt in a ruined building as the Rythari hunted them just outside. Briggs whispered, "Remember, technology is loud, but we are whispers." And then, with a final smear of ash across his face, he vanished into the rubble. A moment later, so did the rest, and the hunt began again.